Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the ML Chat podcast. We are going to continue our series of interviewing multilingual learner educators from NABE at Portland this year. And today we're going to dive into and talk about what they wish they had known earlier in their career or right out the gate that has made a big difference for them. So you're going to love this. Buckle up, tune in, and let's go. To get us started, we are going to go to New York and talk with Shakira and Kat Perez.
I would say differentiation and scaffolding and learning how to do that in a classroom with students from different backgrounds, different learning styles and all of that. How to take one lesson or one theme and making sure that I have everyone in mind when I design how to execute a specific lesson or theme, I think is something that I wish I knew that it was important, and also how to do when I first started as well.
Yeah, and I would say too, I think during the program we learned about universal design of learning. So it wasn't until I started I learned how to kind of cater to all students and learning styles and things of that nature, and kind of just catering to all modalities. And I feel like had I known that earlier on, maybe just incorporating that into everything. I don't know, it's just been a cool thing to learn, and knowing that you can cater to a lot of people.
When I first started teaching and comparing, my origins, because I was a preschool teacher before doing this graduate program, and thinking about my origins versus now, and learning about in this graduate program that we're in all about translanguaging and allowing students to move through, to be proud of their different languaging and moving through those modalities of languaging in a way that's not in a hierarchy. I wish I knew that the value of incorporating that in the classroom experience, and how valuable it is to a child's self-concept to prioritize that and do that in the classroom space, or for us in the clinical space as well.
Well, Tim, there is a lot to unpack there. Shakira and Kat Perez had some wonderful ideas, and you can tell that the future is bright when we've got educators like this coming into the fold. What jumped out to you the most, from Shakira and Kat?
Other than being from the Bronx, that is near and dear to my heart. That's where I grew up as a teacher. So When I heard that, my heart started to sing. But to Shakira and Kat, thanks so much for sharing. And Justin, for me, there were two significant themes that emerged from the comments, and certainly that have come up in our prior discussions in our NABE series, right? So that's pretty validating. Firstly, I loved how it was described how the power of translanguaging and honoring all of the language our students bring to school, and the impact on our students' self-concept. And when I think about that, it can be a little vague, to think about, say, a student's linguistic, social, and cultural funds of knowledge. Translanguaging offers a very tangible way, for teachers to actually honor those funds of knowledge by creating the space for students to use their full linguistic repertoire in class. And we think about, language as a door, to culture, right? And I just so appreciated the very thoughtful way that our colleagues, offered translanguaging as an approach for creating a classroom environment that honors what our students know and are able to do with all of their language.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And I was wondering if you were going to talk about, where that you get started in the Bronx too. How fun.
Oh, yeah.
What a fun connection. We're going to have to maybe even some more connection with Shakira and Kat. But one of the things that really jumped out to me as I'm listening, the importance of translanguaging is just, evident, right? As the more and more we get into this work, and the more research that shows up, we really learn so much about building on the language that students are bringing to the work. The one piece that I loved was them talking about, taking one concept or one unit and going deep with it, trying to use different modalities, adjusting it for the students that they're going to teach, and really just trying to differentiate for each student's learning modality, each student's needs, each student's assets that they're bringing to it. And I love that thinking, because, for teachers who are at the beginning of their career to be thinking this way is really powerful. And I guess my question that I wanted to ask you, Tim, as I was listening is, I remember talking with you about your early days as a teacher, and you were just trying to like keep your head above water. Like you didn't realize you were supposed to take like attendance. And when you hear, these teachers that are coming in and they're talking like this, and this is their perspective, what does that make you think, from these folks? And how difficult is it to differentiate when you're at the, early on?
Yeah, that's actually the first connection I made, Justin, as I was hearing was I had a principal who shall go nameless. That was my second principal at my school in the Bronx, my first school, and he used to practically jump up and down, exhorting us as teachers in a staff meeting to differentiate our instruction. You must differentiate your instruction. And so, conceptually, he was reminding us that we needed to differentiate for our students. But as a novice practitioner, I didn't yet have the skill set to really know what that actually looked like. I had no mental model for it. And what I appreciate about how our colleagues went on to actually provide a framework for how we can actually think about differentiation and practice. So using Universal Design for Learning, UDL, provides a framework to support, a framework to really reach our students, where they're at. And it's that sort of framework that can help us, through our lesson design to make sure that we're amplifying, language and concepts, and really pushing our students to greater depths of knowledge, while recognizing that everyone's going to have different entry point for those particular skills, concepts, and language. And so, again, to Shakira and Kat, I really appreciate how you specifically reference a framework to help us, do something that's actually quite hard. The classroom of close to 30 kids. It's no small feat to meet everybody where they're at and making sure everybody gets what they need.
That's right. And and I just love that they're coming in with that mental model, right? That it's not just somebody jumping up and down and telling them to differentiate, but they're able to walk in the classroom with UDL in their mind of universal design learning, and being able to think about each of these students and try to understand them. I have 6 kids, which is a lot of kids. And I will tell you, every single one of them is different. And I have a hard time just differentiating for my 6 kids and their needs, and, being able to parent them the way that they need to be parented. And I just recognize, like, to be in a classroom with 25 to 30 to, sometimes even more students, and differentiating is a significant task. And it really does take, experts, right, and professionals to really impact those students and drive the lesson home for each student in the way that they can take it and run and build on what they know and what they have. And I love this work, and I'm just so grateful for our educators who are committed to differentiating instruction for students. This is great.
Yeah, I just had speaking of mental models, I just had a picture of your family, 6 kids. It's like a basketball team with one person in reserve.
Yeah. It's more like
you always got one on the bench.
It's more like a circus, and we're just trying to not have the lions eat us, and
That's so great.
Stand on one foot on a ball over here and stuff, A basketball team makes it feel like we're in concert, in unison, and all working on the same.
Yep, everybody working together.
I love it too. All right, next we are going to go to Illinois, the Homewood School District 153, where we get to speak with Damaris Woodbury, an EL teacher.
It sounds very simple and silly, but I wish I knew how important visuals were to everyone, not just our English language learners. Yeah, just visuals and realia, and how important it is to make things that students feel are abstract very literal and relatable. And so not only are we teaching them the content, but we're also teaching them the language to access the content. And with science and social studies, it's so important to build that vocabulary up and build up that background knowledge. So we use a lot of visuals prior to delving into the unit to explain the vocabulary and describe the vocabulary. And then with our K through second graders, just a simple book on storytelling or the steps of a story, having pictures and having them retell and use that oracy in reading is really important. And so visuals are, to me, the foundation of everything.
All right. Thank you, Damaris. We love your thought and your idea here about the importance of visuals and kind of helping, take the abstract and make it more relatable and more approachable for students. Tim, when you listen to Damaris here and she's talking about, the importance of visuals, what are some of the best practices that come to your mind as far as how to use that and incorporate that in the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many entry points. Actually, when you think about this comment, it's actually not terribly far afield from the prior comments we heard from Shakira and Kat, and that is the notion of offering just a multitude of entry points. We offer students visuals and realia because of, the power of students making connection to their lived experiences. It's really simply it's an invitation for students to share the language, the skills, the experiences that they've had both in school and outside of school, and to build upon those connections. And so teachers really have this wonderful opportunity by offering visuals, by offering realia for students to bring in these concrete connections to then, and I loved how she said this, making the abstract relatable. Mm-hmm. And having that sort of concrete foundation of language and experience to actually draw upon when you do get into more, say, abstract class concepts.
Well, and especially with our multilingual learners, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Typically they're bringing language into that classroom or into this new environment. And an image is a great way to be able to make that connection that you're talking about, right? And to be able to, draw that immediate connection. And it's one of the things we were actually surprised by with Flashlight 360 when we kind of rolled it out initially. I mean, we had built it for the multilingual learner who was learning English, and in the very first building that we put it in Stansbury Elementary in the Granite School District, the principal looked at it and he says, "Oh, well, we're going to use this for our dual language too, and put it into, the class where they're doing Spanish immersion. And here students were able to, label in their heritage language, speak in Spanish, write in Spanish." And it was just really neat to be able to then have them do that same activity in English. And the teachers were able to look at that connection, be able to see how students were growing, where they were strong, where they had some room for improvement, where they could, incorporate that into their lesson plans. And it was so interesting for us, but all of it came down to being able to have that visual, that image that the students, could talk to, speak to, use their language. And it really did drive home that ability to connect and build on the student's experience and prior knowledge and experience.
It's a concrete example, right, Justin? Mm-hmm. And I think further, again, going back to the comment from Shakira and Kat, the reference to visuals and realia also is just a beautiful way to offer students the translanguaging space. That is using all of their language to make connections to, as Damaris said, these abstract concepts. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in English, these concepts, but by offering a space for students to bring their home language into the classroom to then build upon that by making connections across language. It's a great example, very concrete.
Oh, so concrete and so mm-hmm. powerful. And I love how these are building on each other. Mm-hmm. I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, what if I'm in a district that maybe, maybe we're not talking a lot about translanguaging, and we don't do a good job of honoring, students' heritage language, in part because maybe we don't have the resources to do it. I don't speak Spanish, or I don't speak, whatever the language is, Chinese that the student is coming in, and it's harder for me to be able to honor that heritage language. What would you say to like that teacher, or maybe that EL director that's just getting started, EL coordinator, they're just kind of stepping in, they'd been in the classroom, now they're trying to run a program, and they're realizing how behind, they are and how much work they have to do. Like, how do you begin that process of going, from not really recognizing it, not honoring the heritage language, not going down the translanguaging route, with students and helping them use both languages? Like, where do you get started in that?
Well, yeah. That's a thoughtful question, and I hear this a lot, like a reluctance to offer students the space to use their home language. And fundamentally, we have to understand that it's not about us as teachers. That we have to create this space, right? We don't have to know all of the languages in order to have a productive translanguaging experience, but rather it's our job in our lesson design to offer students the opportunity to show us what they know and can do. And by availing, say, a great way to do this would be, say, image analysis. I love using image analysis, where I would often take a visual that is somehow conceptually related to a concept we're going to analyze as a class, and I put that on a big piece of chart paper, give students a designated color for marker, and just ask them to mark up what they see in the image. And basically what you get is just a beautiful semantic map of all of the connections students are making to the image, irrespective of the language. When I think about my former classroom, no, yes, as a Spanish speaker, I could support my students with like discrete connections between English and Spanish, but my French proficiency isn't good. Certainly my Wolof proficiency wasn't very good for my Senegalese students. And heck, I didn't speak Mandinko, Jula, or Berifor. And so all this to say is that it's not on us as teachers to know these different languages, but rather avail the space for students to make connections, between their language. And so image analysis is a really great way to do it. Quick writing is another, wonderful way to encourage students to make connections to their home language. And of course, there are even more concrete ways to do it with, say, Freyer models are a great way for students to analyze vocabulary with a multilingual lens.
I love everything that you just said, but the thing that I love the most was when you said, it's not about you as a teacher, it's about your student. And once we put the students at the heart of the matter, well, of course, translanguaging should be a piece of the process, right? Of course, we want to build on the language that these students bring, to this, to their journey. This is not our journey. This is not my journey. This is their journey. This student's journey to learning English, to building their knowledge and understanding. And frankly, we want them to build their heritage language more too, right? Like that's, the worst thing would be to, learn English and fade away on their native language,
But that in a sense is a shift, Justin.
Right.
I mean, I started as an ESL teacher, 20 plus years ago, and we didn't talk about that. And in fact, the discussion was how to, create like an English rich environment. And unfortunately, a lot of that instruction was subtractive. As a school district leader, I interview families all the time that tell me about the adverse impact of the ESL programming had on them as students. And now their children are in additive bilingual programs or in integrated ELD programs that really flip the script, so to speak, but it really runs counter to the mental model that our families have for having isolated experiences and during their ELD time.
Well, it's
And,
interesting to
you
think
know, like,
that parent, right? If you're
yeah,
that
yeah,
parent and you grew up where, the school system was trying to kind of take away your Spanish, if you will, and here you're trying to pour it into your student, or you might be a little confused, not knowing exactly what the right way is to approach, educating and raising your child, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so when we call out translanguaging, specifically, I really like to offer it as like, it's not like a moment in a lesson, but you think about it as a multitude of moments. It's really a biliteracy practice that encourages our students to make these connections.
Oh, that's fantastic, Tim. That's great. Hey, thank you, Damaris, for sharing such a thoughtful idea from Illinois to get us started and kind of talking through that. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to go to Connecticut, one of the first school districts that I worked with, actually up in the Northeast, in Meriden, Connecticut. We're going to talk with Kat Magazzino.
I think letting students talk, really inviting a culture in the classroom where students can talk, where they can collaborate, where they can bounce ideas off of each other and build language based on differing levels of English language proficiency or whatever the target language proficiency is.
Wow. Thank you, Kat. I love that. I love your energy, and I love that you're talking about letting students talk, building a culture of collaboration. You can tell like she just oozed passion and energy around that, Tim. My question for you is, how do you just let students talk and it not become pandemonium?
Pandemonium. I like that because it's often the thing that, certainly what I hear from colleagues and feeling some, how to say it, like hesitation around like, okay, like,
right.
How do I take myself out of the center of the dialogue, right? And really compel our students to talk. And I really like to think about this through the lens of task design. That it's not just a free for all, right? But it's offering students quality prompts, a quality structure, and then something to actually do with that talk. And Justin, you might remember that a number of weeks ago at the start of the summer, I got to participate in a week-long institute with Aida Walke, and it was a week-long workshop on interaction, on quality student interaction.
Oh, how could I forget, Tim? You came back glowing for like the next 2 weeks, I think. So yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of riding that wave, of just like the excitement, around high quality professional learning. And I felt particularly engaged by having a framework a framework to offer students space to connect in a meaningful way. And of course, developmentally, that's going to look, different, at say the primary grades in the elementary between the, grades 3 through 5 in an elementary, and then certainly it'll look different as our students grow through middle school and high school. But fundamentally, it's really a question of who's doing the thinking. And, Justin, I like to think about this oftentimes as like almost like traffic, like the traffic pattern in class. If the traffic pattern is such that, the information goes from teacher to select hands in the air, it gives an awful lot of time for students to fade into the background, right? And to tune out.
Right.
But rather, what my experience and, with Aida Walke and QTEL offered me was just like a new framework to think about how we can use quality prompts and routines to pass the thinking on to the students that collectively, students are building new understandings. So, maybe it's, opening the lesson with, say, an image analysis. Students are contributing their thoughts in a common space and a common image. And then they share those thoughts with partners at their table. And then the table comes to consensus on the things that they want to share with the rest of the class. And then I offer my students a routine like novel ideas only, in which every table is responsible for sharing the collective thinking that they generated from the prior task. That is, what I learned in this institute is that it's really about these sort of iterative cycles of students generating ideas and then contributing those ideas for the benefit of the class. It's really kind of a collective learning frame, right?
You're welcome, everybody, for that framework and that model that Tim just gave you. That was amazing, Tim. I love how here. I know it's a big part of your thinking, and that it's near and dear to your heart. But clear intended learning, like you just went through and built that framework, and each of those activities builds on itself. And that's how you end up with not having just chaos and pandemonium in the classroom. It's not a free for all, as you mentioned. It's really, it's really constructive because of the intention that's put into it. And I'm guessing that that's what Kat was talking about when she was talking about having a culture of collaboration. It's working on projects like you kind of just detailed out and kind of talked to. There was one thing specifically that you kind of asked the question, and you kind of talked about it as a traffic pattern, Tim, but of like, who is doing the thinking? And do you mind unpacking that just a little bit more? I know you kind of used an example of, if it's just from the teacher to the student or to the students and you're waiting for responses, there's a lot of room for students to fade into the background or fade in and out of the conversation or whatever it might be. What's another way to think about that?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. How about ping pong? Ping pong's a really good way to think about it too.
Well, I love ping pong. Can you give us more of an example?
Yeah. So I think we've probably all, either from our own mental model, our own experience in school, or perhaps, we have the experience of even in our own classrooms, right? I'm the teacher, I have a question, I ask the question to the class, select students in the class raise their hands, and then they swat the answer back to me, right? And then I swat it back again with a question, and then the hands are up again, and it assumes a number of things. That's sort of that questioning, right? As firstly, that all of your students are participating in a meaningful way, and say, we know that is typically not the case. In a classroom of 26 students, there's an awful lot of opportunity to check out, right? A dear friend of mine refers to this as expecting and creating the conditions for 100% engagement. And by taking away the ability to opt out, right? But rather you're kind of leveraging the social impulses that our students have to make connections with their peers. That foundationally, this is about sociocultural, language learning, that our kids want to be social, right? And so it's about harnessing that through quality prompts, quality texts, and, well, quality routines, right? Recursive, iterative routines that encourage our students to kind of process, make meaning, share ideas, build on their schema, and then share that thinking for the benefit of the class.
And we talked about the importance of routines in our last episode and kind of went deep into that. But I can see that, in a classroom, that's only going to happen, what you're describing as far as, the collaboration, the collaborative conversations among students, like that's only going to happen if a teacher walks in prepared, first of all, to with that mindset, and not only that, but I guess with the confidence. I don't know. I guess I just feel like it takes a lot of faith to go down that road, because teachers have to give up some control, and they're having to kind of give up control of that conversation, and instead of them driving that conversation, they are transferring the ownership of that conversation to each of the small groups to then, take it and run with it. It's just an interesting thought, for me. Is that a good way to think about it? Or
I really, yeah, I really like to challenge just the thought around I'm, giving up control, right?
Mhm.
I really don't see it that way. I see it more um, as a question of pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
That by with either through quality prompts, interesting texts, relevant texts, giving our students ideas to grapple with, and providing some guardrails around it. That I really what was really clear to me as a participant in Aida's workshop, for instance, is that every person in every group was accountable at the end of the task for contributing, contributing their thinking, right? That fundamentally there's a accountability there. Now, if you were to juxtapose that in to the ping pong metaphor, it's only that one student with their hand raised that is accountable in that moment.
Right.
What are the other students doing? And oftentimes, as a coach, for instance, something that I often do is I'll draw a map, or just like a discourse map in the of the classroom to point out like where the discourse patterns are.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you'll find them going to either predictable voices, right? When you think about, say, students that might be reluctant to share are not compelled to share, right? And so they can very easily fade into the background, while say more eager voices share their contributions with raised hands. And so to put a bow on this, that prompting, relying on partner work, small group work, consensus building routines. These are ways that we can encourage all of our students to participate in a meaningful way, instead of, say, an eager few students that are wanting to raise their hands and share.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I really appreciate you breaking it down like that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, Tim.
And next, we're going to hear from Kim Kaiser, a proud principal of Grissom Elementary from Houston ISD.
I learned a lot in the GLAD training today, and it talked about just basically the visuals, the hands-on, and really making biliteracy just amazing for students by respecting and adopting their culture and making systems strong so that you can support students.
Tim, I love hearing a principal, talk about the different instructional strategies that might be used to support students. I just feel like there's been a big shift over the last 10 years in what we're asking of principals. And I love it when they step up and they really are that instructional leader for their building.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I think, for me, my primary connection to Kim was actually the energy in her voice, the enthusiasm. And I am not surprised to hear that sort of enthusiasm, from a colleague that just attended a GLAD training. GLAD is really language rich, happy instruction. In a classroom using GLAD strategies, you'll often hear chants. You'll hear all voices in a classroom, singing, making connections to class concepts, to language. It really is a very happy place to be, Justin. And so the enthusiasm there, I think, is reminiscent of what it feels like to actually be in a classroom that is practicing kind of a GLAD framework.
I love that. And that's why she's the proud principal. So that's
why she's the proud principal. But anyone that's interested in GLAD, you might look into it. Guided language acquisition design. That's effectively professional learning for offering your students language-rich learning.
And that might be a good place to start. Earlier I had kind of talked a little bit about, if you were a new EL coordinator stepping into a role, trying to bring a department or a program into 2023. That sounds like that might be a good place to start, maybe.
Absolutely. It's super tangible. And if you want to find sort of it really is a pretty like content agnostic, frame to offer teachers, ways to amplify their lesson design, right? By making it language rich.
And if you are interested in learning more about them, you can check out their website. It's begladtraining.com.
Well, I am very impressed with GLAD. It has a really amazing structure to help with the shelter instructions, so I really wish that most of the educators are exposed to it, because it's gentle and it can be applied to any language.
And for me, as an administrator, I want to be able to support that work that my teachers are doing. So for GLAD, that's something that we're going to be working for next year, to be able to train not just my bilingual teacher, but also, because it's not just a program in silo, like we need to be able to provide that same instructional strategies building wide so that everybody understands and can integrate with our kids, because it's not just the bilingual kids, it's every kid.
Jazz hands. Yay! I just absolutely loved that comment, Justin. First of all, I should recognize our colleagues from the great state of Oregon and the Phoenix Talent School District. So it's so cool to hear voices of our colleagues representing Southern Oregon there in Phoenix Talent. And I don't know about you, Justin, but I was just moved by the emphasis on a language-rich experience for all students. This is not just for bilingual students, but rather offering a language-rich experience for all students within a classroom, and having a structure for doing it, for having routines for doing it.
That's right, and it really is a culminating thought, really, like for everything we've been talking about today. I mean. My favorite was just as we were listening to Erika and Aleda talk, I just loved. I'm pretty sure I saw you dancing in your seat over there. Just love the excitement in your voice, or in your body language, just because frankly, like this is the work, right? Like this is the work we're on. The mission that we're on. To a large degree is to provide educators with these frameworks and these mindsets that just shift, how the work is being done in the classroom. And so, we hear them mention GLAD again, but really, I just love that they're talking about, creating language-rich environments. That's just awesome.
Mm-hmm. This is, in no way a counterpoint, Justin, but rather, I think, just another way to look at it. And that is really, through the student experience,
right? And
thinking about the contrast of, and perhaps this is actually kind of a theme throughout our discussion, today is thinking about this through the lens of student engagement, and how our students are participating joyfully by interacting, with their peers, in contrast to, say, more traditional modes of a classroom where the student might be more, passively engaged in their class as a listener. But what about, having a framework to design lessons that really makes, students connect, share thinking, and sort of, collectively, build new learning. And I think that was certainly the connection I made to our prior comments, and certainly what I heard from our colleagues in Phoenix Talent.
Yeah, most definitely. And I love that, just this idea of the student-centered, experience, right? And when I hear you talk about the joy of the student, going on this journey, I love it. And I think that it's the truth, right? Like if we can infuse joy into the students' journey. I think it's a lot more enjoyable for our teachers as well, for our leaders. Like it is more of a shared, there's more spirit. There's I was taught by a mentor a number of years ago about esprit de corps, the spirit of the group. And I think that when people are all, when we're working in this way, there's a lot more collaboration. When there's a lot more collaboration, there's a lot more joy. And I think there's just there's something to that, frankly, I think if there's a lot more joy, there's probably also a lot more growth.
Mm-hmm. And again, just, kind of closing the loop here from some of the other themes that we've heard come up this morning. It's really the intentionality, required in designing tasks that connect students, through relevant, engaging prompts. That is, you had mentioned, is it a free for all? Is it pandemonium in class? Like how do I go about it? Project GLAD, quality teaching for English learners, QTEL. These are basic. Understanding. Universal design for learning was another framework we discussed today as well. These are basically pedagogies. They're frameworks that we can think more critically about the ways in which we design tasks that engage our students in meaningful ways. So how do we take ourselves out of the center of that traffic pattern as the the air traffic control, so to speak, for the classroom? No, we can use prompts. We can use tasks that connect our students. In making meaning of new ideas and sharing their thoughts, and all with the purpose of building collective understanding.
Well, and I think that one of the big things we've talked about probably really in a lot of episodes is the importance of having these routines that we have in the classroom, right?
Sure. Yep.
And I think part of it is we free up working memory by jumping into our routine. There's less decisions we have to make. It takes less energy because it's what we do, right? And when I think about, these frameworks and these structures, from a teacher's perspective, like that's what that is doing. It's giving, teachers the ability. It makes a few less decisions that maybe they have to start from scratch to create a process to be able to create that language-rich environment, to be able to focus on students and differentiate and do some of these things, is because now they have this framework that they can, plug in the different activities to have a collaborative conversation that each task builds on itself, kind of like you walked us through earlier, right? Where if you don't have that model, it can be really paralyzing, I think, to try and figure out how do I build this out, and just really overwhelming.
It's crazy making. It can be really overwhelming if you don't have a pedagogy to rely on. Mm-hmm. And if that pedagogy is GLAD, wonderful. That's excellent, right? I happen to grow up, under the mentorship of Aida Walke, and I was really inspired by lesson design in 3 moments. And on prior podcasts, we've discussed the 3 moments as a lesson planning framework, but it's also principled in that it privileges student interaction, that making sure that I have high quality prompts and making sure that I have interesting, relevant texts to compel my students to yes, make connections with their peers, but also make connections to new ideas. And so I think, whichever framework you land on, just having one that has a reliable pedagogy to help you, plan your lessons really ensures that your students will have a coherent experience in class, a highly engaged experience in class, and making sure that our students are building their language concepts and skills simultaneously.
Well said. That's beautiful. And I'm not sure we can add anything more to that, Tim. What an amazing day today. Like, I have loved kind of going through all of these wonderful conversations that we had at NABE, and just really appreciate, our colleagues and folks that participated and lent their voice to this conversation to be able to really help us, drive this forward. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for, to Shakira and Kat and Damaris and Kat Magazzino and Kim Kaiser and Aleda Mark and Erika Ochoa. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And Tim, thank you. I think this is really appreciate your leadership and your insight, and these ideas are hopefully, getting out there to go impact, our multilingual learners throughout the nation.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, and thanks to all of my colegas.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to the ML Chat podcast as we continued our conversations at NABE. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.